Some stories that pop up online feel less like news and more like modern-day fables. They get shared, remixed, and retold millions of times because they tap into a truth we all recognize. The story you're about to hear is one of those. Now, to be clear, this is an inspirational, fictionalized story, not a documented news report. The characters, a billionaire named Alistair Finch and a waitress named Amara Caldwell, are fictional, created to bring the story to life. While videos telling similar tales are viral, they are presented as dramatizations, not factual events. But the reason this story is so powerful is that it gets at something real: the danger of judging people, the quiet power of dignity, and the truth that a person's job doesn't define their worth. It's a reminder that beneath any uniform there can be a depth of experience that can humble even the most powerful people on earth. In a restaurant where a single dessert costs more than a week's worth of groceries, a billionaire named Alistair Finch leaned forward, a smirk plastered on his face. He looked right through the black waitress serving him, as if she were a piece of furniture. He turned to his business partner and, in Arabic, a language he was sure she wouldn't understand, he let his contempt spill out. "She is so slow," he muttered with disdain. "People like this have no ambition." His buddies at the table let out a few pathetic chuckles, all of them safe in their shared bubble of privilege. The air grew tense. Everyone expected the usual uncomfortable scene. The server, sensing the insult without knowing the words, would hurry away ashamed. But what she did next, nobody, least of all the billionaire, saw coming. She paused, her hands steady, and slowly met his gaze. And in flawless, eloquent Arabic, she replied, "To really get the impact of that moment, you have to picture the scene. This wasn't just any restaurant. It was Ethelgard's, a name whispered with reverence among the global elite. Ethelgard's was a theater for the rich. The air smelled like old money and fresh orchids, and the lighting was engineered to make diamonds sparkle. The waiters moved like ghosts, their faces trained into masks of polite deference. They were paid to be invisible, to see unbelievable displays of wealth without so much as a flicker of a reaction. The patrons were a who's who of global power: tech moguls, oil sheiks, and old money aristocrats. It was a beautiful and brutal ecosystem, and our two main characters were about to collide right in the middle of it. Our hero is a young woman named Amara Caldwell. To the diners at Ethelgard's, she was just part of the scenery. They saw a black waitress, and for them, the story ended there. They didn't see the fierce intelligence in her eyes or the dignity in her posture. They couldn't know this job was just a chapter for her, a way to pay for her master's degree in international relations and diplomacy. Her mind was a tapestry of political theory, economics, and languages. You see, her father had been a diplomat, and her childhood took her from Addis Ababa to Cairo, Riyadh to Amman. While other kids were learning nursery rhymes, Amara was soaking up the cadences of different languages in bustling markets and formal embassy events. Arabic for her wasn't just a class she took. It was the soundtrack of her youth, the language of her father's proudest work. She wore her waitress uniform like a temporary costume. Inside, she was a scholar and a citizen of the world. Armed with a powerful sense of self-worth, her father had taught her that dignity is the one thing no one can ever take from you. Then there was Alistair Finch, our villain. Finch was a self-made billionaire who had clawed his way to the top of international finance. Along the way, he'd shed his empathy like a snake sheds its skin. He believed the headlines that called him a visionary. To him, the world wasn't made of people. It was made of assets and liabilities. Service staff on his ledger were liabilities, unseen and unimportant. His arrogance radiated from his expensive suit and the $1,000 watch he checked constantly, as if to remind everyone his time was more valuable than theirs. He came to places like Ethelgard's not just to eat, but to perform his status. On this night, he was with two junior associates who laughed too loud at his bad jokes, acting as his personal echo chamber. The tension at Alistair Finch's table started simmering right away. It was a performance. He sent back the first bottle of wine, a vintage that cost more than Amara's monthly rent, calling it impertinently bold. When Amara professionally returned with the sommelier, Finch just ignored them, launching into a loud story about a recent corporate takeover. Amara handled every demand with a calm grace that seemed to annoy Finch. He wanted a reaction, a flustered apology, a nervous tremble, some sign that he'd successfully asserted his dominance. But Amara gave him nothing. Her composure was, in his mind, a form of defiance. She wasn't acting inferior enough for his taste, and it bothered him. The real tipping point came when a man named Tariq Al-Jamil joined the table. Tariq was different. He was a potential investor from the Gulf, a key figure in a sovereign wealth fund, and he carried himself with a quiet, inherent authority. Finch was desperate to close a massive deal with him, a deal rumored to be worth over $300 million. With Tariq's arrival, Finch's need to show off went into overdrive. Finch started dropping clumsy, broken Arabic phrases into the conversation, trying to build a connection with his guest. Tariq, a man of genuine culture, just offered polite, cool smiles. He could spot a fraud from a mile away. Feeling his attempts failing, Finch got desperate for a new way to show his power. His eyes swept the room and landed on Amara. He had his prop. He would create an inside joke with his potential Arab partner at her expense. He motioned her over with a flick of his fingers. "The service here tonight is glacial," he said to Tariq, loud enough for other tables to hear. Then he switched to his clumsy Arabic, looking at Tariq but aiming his words right at Amara, a verbal stone he thought she couldn't possibly understand. He said, "Hiya batia jidin. She is so slow." He paused, waiting for a laugh. Then he added another layer, making it about her very existence. "Ha'ula'i al-nas laysa ladayhim tumuh." People like this have no ambition. It was a stunningly arrogant dismissal of another human being. He was defining and discarding her, all from behind the shield of a language he thought was his private club. His two associates snickered on cue. Tariq Al-Jamil's face remained still, but a flicker of distaste crossed his eyes. The insult hung in the air, thick and poisonous. It seemed as if the entire restaurant fell silent, all eyes on the waitress, waiting for her to retreat. In that moment, it was as if a vacuum had descended on the table, sucking out all the sound. Every eye was locked on Amara. They saw a young woman in a simple uniform, standing before a billionaire who had just tried to humiliate her for sport. They waited for her to crumple. For a split second, a storm of anger raged inside Amara. It was the familiar sting of being underestimated, of being reduced to a stereotype. But then, her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Dignity is a shield you forge yourself. Let their ignorance be the hammer that strengthens it." The storm inside her calmed, replaced by an icy resolve. She wasn't just a waitress. She was the daughter of a diplomat, and she would not be broken. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. Instead, she seemed to stand even taller, holding the silver tray not like a burden, but like a shield. Slowly, she lifted her head and met Alistair Finch's smug gaze. Her eyes weren't angry. They were just clear, direct, and held a depth of knowledge he couldn't possibly imagine. And then she spoke. Her voice was confident and stunningly clear, and it wasn't in English. She spoke in a fluid, elegant Arabic, the kind spoken by the educated and cultured. The pronunciation was perfect. She looked directly into Finch's widening eyes and said calmly, "Al-udhr, Sayyidi, ala but'i. Forgive my slowness, sir." The words dropped into the silent room like stones in a still pond. The ripples of shock were immediate. Finch's smirk froze. He understood the words, but his brain couldn't process them coming from her. But Amara wasn't done. She held his gaze and delivered the final blow. "Al-tumuh al-hakiki, fi ra'i, la yakun sahiban daiman." True ambition, in my opinion, is not always loud. She paused, letting the words sink in. Then, her voice softening but losing none of its power, she concluded, "Ahyanan, yujad fi al-sa'i al-had lil karama wal marifa. Hiya kiyam la yumkin shira'uha." Sometimes, It is found in the quiet pursuit of dignity and knowledge. These are values that cannot be bought. A collective gasp swept through the room. It was a flawless checkmate. She hadn't just understood his insult, she had dismantled it and handed it back to him, exposing its crude, ignorant core. She had used his own weapon against him with an elegance he could never match. Alistair Finch's face was a ruin. The smug color drained from his cheeks, leaving a sickly gray pallor. His jaw hung slack. He was the king who had just been dethroned in his own court by someone he didn't even think was in the game. His arrogance was stripped away, leaving only his ugly prejudice for everyone to see. But the most telling reaction was from Tariq al-Jamil. As Amara spoke, his cool mask dissolved, his eyes shining with pure admiration. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. He looked at Amara, then at the crumbling billionaire, and a look of utter contempt settled on his features. The deal was dead. Finch hadn't just insulted a waitress. He'd insulted Tariq's intelligence, his culture, and his language. The power dynamic in the room had been turned upside down. Alistair Finch, the titan of industry, now looked small and pathetic. Amara Caldwell, the waitress, was a figure of immense power. It was Tariq al-Jamil who finally broke the spell. He pushed his chair back and stood up, but he looked only at Amara. In the same elegant Arabic she had used, he said, his voice warm and full of respect. Shukran laki ala darsik fi al-karama. Thank you for your lesson in dignity. Kana al-jahal yahtaju ila mithil hadha al-nur. Ignorance was in need of such a light. He gave her a slight, respectful bow, a gesture of profound acknowledgement. Amara simply inclined her head in return. Her victory was so total, it needed no celebration. Only then did Tariq turn to the shell-shocked Alistair Finch. Switching back to cold, crisp English, every word was a hammer blow for the whole room to hear. Alistair, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Our meeting for tomorrow is canceled. In fact, all business discussions between our organizations are concluded, as of this moment. Finch sputtered, Tariq, wait! It was a joke, a misunderstanding. Tariq held up a hand. There is no misunderstanding. I understand perfectly that you find casual cruelty entertaining. I understand you judge a person's worth by their uniform, not their character. I will not do business with a man who possesses so little of it. The deal is off. The phrase, $300 million deal, seemed to hang in the air, a ghost of Finch's shattered ambition. His associates looked like they'd seen a ghost, terrified they had hitched their careers to a falling star. Finch opened and closed his mouth like a fish, but no sound came out. And what did Amara do? She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply gave a slight professional nod to the table, picked up the rejected bottle of wine, and walked away with the same graceful, measured steps she'd used all evening. It wasn't a retreat, it was a victory lap. The entire restaurant watched her go, not as a waitress, but as a queen leaving a battlefield. Alistair Finch was left sitting in the ruins of his dinner and his reputation, a monument to his own spectacular failure. The story of Finch's public humiliation quickly became the talk of London's elite, a cautionary tale about arrogant foolishness. His reputation was now tainted by the image of a petty, cruel bully. The loss of the $300 million deal with Tariq was just the first domino to fall. But for Amara, that night was a new beginning. Before leaving the restaurant, Tariq al-Jamil sought her out and met her discreetly near the staff entrance. Miss Caldwell, he began, having asked the manager for her name. I hope you don't mind me waiting. I couldn't leave without speaking to you properly. Amara, though surprised, kept her composure. It's no trouble, sir. What you did tonight, he said, his voice full of genuine admiration, was an act of courage and profound integrity. The world has enough loud, empty men like Alistair Finch. It needs more people with your quiet strength. He then asked her about herself, not with condescension, but with the genuine interest of a mentor. Amara told him about her studies, her passion for geopolitics, and her fluency in 3 languages. Tariq listened, a smile growing on his face. To think, he said, that a mind like yours is clearing plates for a man like him. He then looked at her directly. My fund invests across Africa and the Middle East. We're always looking for sharp analysts who understand the cultures and the languages, not just the numbers. I would be honored if you would consider interviewing for a position with us. He handed her his personal business card. This isn't pity, he clarified. This is respect. Talent like yours should be cultivated, not ignored. Amara stood there, the smart in her hand feeling like a key to a new world. It was more than a job offer. It was a validation of everything she was working towards. It was proof that dignity, when you hold on to it, becomes its own kind of power. This story, whether it's a real event or a modern parable, holds a powerful lesson. You never truly know the brilliance of the person standing right in front of you. If you believe in the power of dignity and that every person deserves respect, show your support by subscribing and hitting that notification bell for more stories that matter. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that talent is everywhere. And let us know in the comments. When have you seen someone completely underestimate another person, only to be proven spectacularly wrong? In the end, this was never just a story about a waitress who could speak Arabic. It was a story about two clashing value systems, one that measures people by their bank account, and another that measures them by their character and integrity. Alistair Finch lost more than a deal that night. He lost his illusion of superiority. Amara Caldwell gained more than a job offer. She affirmed her own unshakable worth. The story is a powerful reminder. Look closer. Listen better. The person you're tempted to look down on might just be the one you should be looking up to.